Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that's so important because so if you look at this, because I'm logical and I'm always like, this isn't logical. Why do we do this? So our current cancer treatment is, of course, we identify it, which means it has to get large enough for us to see it. It's never, some of these like pancreatic and gallbladder and liver. By the time we find it, it's usually already has metastatic activity that is extensive. So we find it, we go in and we cut a large portion of stuff around it and lymph nodes and all that stuff. We remove that primary tumor without any attention to the tertiary activity, except for we pray the chemo and the radiation gets it.
Yeah.
And then chemo, let's face it, it's poison, and we're trying to poison the cancer cells faster than we poison the rest of the body, because that's essentially what we're doing.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean, if you look at traditional treatment today, they're going to basically use surgery, they're going to use radiation, and they're going to use chemo. And, if you think about that, like surgery is cutting you, radiation is burning you, and chemo is poisoning you. So if I said to you, hey, you have this condition, I'm going to cure you. And the way I'm going to cure you is I'm going to cut you, I'm going to burn you, and I'm going to poison you. It doesn't sound great. Like there has to be a better way. Now, some of the immunotherapies I think are interesting because
I agree.
they're not as toxic generally. They're more targeted. They're not cutting and burning you. And the problem with chemo is generally they don't know what works. And so what ends up happening is they put you through multiple rounds of chemo, often with multiple drugs on each round. And oftentimes if the cancer doesn't kill you, the chemo will. And because the toxicity of it on your kidneys, they're nephrotoxic, your liver, they're hepatotoxic, it's immunocompromising, your infections flare up and you can die from infection during chemo. All of that becomes a real problem because it is so toxic. What really should be happening if you're going to use something like that is you need to have precision medicine. You need
Yeah.
to know that it actually works. I mean, one of the things that we'll look at in the future is, CTCs that have been extensively and exhaustively studied over the past 30 years. There's thousands of papers on CTCs. One of the things that's known about them, apart from being the fundamental drivers of metastasis in the bloodstream, is that the CTCs have the same reaction to drugs like chemo as the primary tumor. And,
Okay.
and so what you could do in the future is you could take a blood draw, you could filter out and extract the CTCs, then you could test them with 10, 20, 30, 40 drugs and see what it responds to before you inject poison into a human being. And that's really what should be happening, right?
Yeah.
There really shouldn't be this kind of blind throwing spaghetti at the wall, hoping that something kind of sticks while you completely destroy their body.
Yeah. And, even in breast cancer, which I would say is kind of the golden child of cancer, it gets all the money, which of course, hey, everybody, Komen is not trying to prevent it. They're trying to treat it. They make their money on treatment, not prevention. But the reality is, that's my opinion. I'm just going to hold it. But the reality is even something like breast cancer, we might have tumor genetics and things like that to make some slight assessment of this drug might work better based on the tumor behavior. We still have a really long road to hoe here that to get anything close to like what's the right thing for somebody to take, right? And particularly all the other solid tumors, like it's just we don't have any good treatment at all.
Yeah.
At all.
No, I don't think so. Like I think there's a lot of work to be done on treatment. Just so much that can be done. I think there's a lot of precision that can be done. I mean, today, if you have cancer, like for example, we were talking about surgery earlier. Well, let's even back up before surgery. Like if you just think about screening, like today there's only 5 primary screens in
Yep.
traditional medicine, right? You've got mammogram for breast cancer, you've got pap smear for cervical, you've got colonoscopy for colorectal, PSA for prostate, and lung CT for lung. Now, most people don't get a lung CT unless they're smokers or have some kind of history. So you're down to 4. And depending on your
Hmm.
gender, you're not going to do all of them. If you're male, you're not going to go do a mammogram and a pap smear. If you're female, you're not doing a PSA. So what are you really left with? So as a female, you're doing mammogram for breast, you're doing pap smear for cervical, and maybe a colonoscopy for colorectal. And as a male, you're doing PSA for prostate and maybe colorectal for colonoscopies. And so, what about ovarian? What about uterine? What about esophageal? What about stomach, gastric, kidney, pancreatic, liver, bladder,
Hmm.
brain, skin, thyroid, adrenal, and on and on and on? Most cancers don't have a screen. And that's a fundamental problem. Like even before we get to treatment, they don't detect them early because there is no screen. Pancreatic cancer is a great example of that. Pancreatic cancer is a presumed death sentence.
Yes.
Pancreatic cancer is not a death sentence. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer is probably a death sentence. Stage 1 pancreatic cancer is curable. You just never
Right.
find it. I mean, the only way they really find it is they're doing a procedure in some adjacent organ like your liver. They notice an abnormality in the pancreas. They biopsy it. They go, "Oh, we found pancreatic cancer." And it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, let's say they find at stage 1, it's broken into 1A and 1B. Survival at 1B
Mhm.
is 85%. Survival at 1A is 92%. Survival at stage 0, where we can detect, is 99%. Like, really, the key to this is just catching it early and having something that's broad spectrum that catches all of these cancers and can detect them, not just procedures that catch a handful. And that too, a
Yeah, it's
handful.
Yeah, because again, too many families have been just destroyed by losing loved ones because it's not caught until the metastatic activity is such that they start getting pain. Like I've had people, I had a patient years ago pass away from gallbladder cancer, was the primary tumor.
Yeah,
But of course, they didn't know anything was going on until there was metastatic activity in all the bones and they started having pain,
sure.
you know. And I was like, pain's not a good sign in cancer, right?
No, and that.
And the fact that we just don't have a lot of effort going there, and I know your labs are amazing, and I know you've run up against a lot of let's call them roadblocks to getting into kind of more conventional care environments. And because new is always scary to the existing regime, and I think it's a travesty.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's new, and I think right now you get a lot of pushback before you get reimbursement. Everyone wants insurance, they want CPT codes, but the process for that is long. And,
Very.
it's not really it's very, very long. There's a lot of bureaucracy. It is not efficient, and we're looking at ways to shorten that, but it's going to take time. And in the meantime, it's a cash pay test, and people that fortunately can access it will be able to. But that's where it is, and that's where it's going to be for a little while. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, yeah, because just because it has a CPT code doesn't mean it'll get reimbursed either. We have books that are, inches thick that are there. But I think if people were to look at the cancer check labs as a screening tool, that they could do at some interval to identify if they're carrying these circulating tumors, I think a lot of people would prefer to do that. Particularly, I look at it and I'm always stratifying risk. It's like, okay, if I have a family history, if I have personal history, if I've been in a job that increases my risk, that now ratchets up that requirement. And I am of the mindset, pay now, pay later,
Mhm.
right? I can either wait until it becomes a problem or I have a much greater risk for problem, or I can be a little proactive about it. But I think people can look at it that way and then put it on the spectrum of how they care for themselves.